Hi everyone, this is Diane Hank. I want to thank you for your patience. We had to work out a couple of technical things here. So we want to welcome you to the next in our series of informational sessions designed for our MSCs, transitioning to care managers. I want to just give you a quick update. If you want to see any of the prior sessions, all of them are posted on the OPWDD website. I want to also tell you that our upcoming sessions for February 14th and 28th are open for registration. The topics are there on the screen, but essentially on the 14th we will delve into what an MSC needs to do to help individuals and their families transition to CCO health homes. And on the 28th, we'll delve more into the different skills and learning requirements that are involved in being a care manager and broadening your expertise from being an MSC to a care manager. So the registration information is there too. I also want to mention that in terms of your questions, when you submit your questions during these sessions, we answer as many as we can, but if your question is not answered, we actually go through all of them, and we try to make sure that we are addressing them as we can, or that we will address them in upcoming sessions. If you want to see some of the topics that are proposed for our upcoming sessions, you can look on page 46 of the transition plan. The link is also on your screen. Also, if you have topics that are of interest to you that you don't see there, feel free to email that in or text that in as your question. As I said, we do review all of these, and we're trying to make sure that we, over time, inform you as best we can on all these different topic areas as we all work together for the transition. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our presenter today, who is Kate Bishop. She's the Director of Program Development in the Division of Person-Centered Supports, and she'll be joined by Angie Francis, who is our statewide START and MSC coordinator. And our session today is on the life plan and how it compares to an ISP. So Kate and Angie, thanks. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, everyone, for participating today. We're real excited to share with you. I think the first few sessions were really very much about the overall health home model and what's different in a larger kind of contextual way. And today we start to get a little bit more detailed into what is really shifting, what's going to be different, what do we know today, and what's going to be different as we move into the future. And one of those areas that we've been touching on and talking about in our prior sessions is the life plan. So we wanted to give more detail and describe for you today what is similar to what you already know and what is different and what you can expect as we move into the future. So first, I think it's important to set as a starting point with the development of the life plan is that you already have a lot of the strong skills and capabilities that are needed to develop an effective person-centered plan. It's what you've been doing as ISPs have been developed already over time. So it's, as we move into the life plan, it's building on that history, building on your experience, and being able to develop even stronger competencies and capabilities as you move forward with the planning process for people receiving supports within our system. So a lot of these things you'll be somewhat familiar with, some different terminology, some different organization, but many of the things are very similar to things that you already do today. One of the critical differences, just to kind of begin with a clear statement of this, is the use of an IT system. And you've been hearing that through other presentations, but having an IT system will create increased consistency, will create opportunities for ensuring comprehensive plans, and those things will be important, and it's one of the critical elements between what today is an ISP that you're familiar with being typically a typed up document shared via sharing it through PDF versions or uploading, but the new life plan will be in an IT system. So the way it's managed and held and used is different than how the ISP has been over time. So today's session, again, is just going to provide that overview and an introduction to the elements of the life plan. And the other point that I want to make as we talk about the life plan and before we get into the nitty-gritty is about the process for developing the life plan, because that's not integral to the slides you're going to see about the elements and the pieces that are part of the life plan, because the process remains the person-centered process that you're familiar with today. You must use person-centered planning processes as the plan is developed, and that means that the person is the lead in that process and directs the development of the plan to the maximum extent possible for that person. It means that you're involving the people in that person's life that are most important to the person who you're planning with. And that is typically the circle of support members, the people who are delivering supports and services for that individual, and anyone who is really critical to bringing information about the person's desired outcomes and their development of their life plan. So those process steps and what's defined as part of the process steps in today's world carries over into the future development of the life plan. So let's go through some of the specific areas. In developing the 6 core health home services, the CCO Health Home must have an integrated electronic and person-centered life plan, and that needs to include all services and providers. And when we say all services and providers, that's a bit more comprehensive than what we're used to today in the current ISP. And we'll go through that when we go through each of the separate sections. But one of the elements of bringing in an integrated and holistic plan and tying it to those 6 health home core standards is that the health and wellness elements of the person's supports and services are incorporated into the life plan in a much more planful way than what people may be familiar with or used to. The current regulatory requirements of OPWDD covering person-centered planning are consistent with and reflected in the person-centered care planning requirements of the CCO Health Home. So that's kind of redundant to what I've just been talking about, which means that you must, in the development of the life plan, use those defined person-centered practices that have been the foundation for services. So the life plan replaces the ISP, and it will meet all of the regulatory requirements for the person-centered plan. The life plan will be designed to integrate preventative and wellness services, medical and behavioral health care, personal safeguards, and habilitation to support each person's desired personal outcomes in the state-of-the-art document. And again, it's in that IT system that is a new system and being developed, for the health home, the CCO Health Home. The difference is that the ISP only integrates the developmental disability services, and the life plan integrates all services and natural supports. So let's get through each of the specific sections. The demographic and profile section is very similar to the same demographic and profile information that you've been gathering, but it organizes that information in a way that creates consistency through the use of the IT system. So it will involve including the full name of the person, Medicaid number, CCO Health Home that the person is enrolled in, some of the very critical dates that are important to track as far as the initial life plan and the ongoing review of the life plan dates. The demographic section also describes the person's home, work, employment, relationships, health and education profile in person-first language. So the expectation is that the profiles of the person and the information about what the person wants to share about what's most important to them and what they want to achieve through their supports and services are where that information is described. This information should be informed by a discussion with the person, information from people who know the person well, information from person-centered planning process, record reviews, and any assessments that have been completed on that person to help inform the areas of describing what is most important to know about the person receiving supports and services. So Section 2 includes personal outcomes. So we're going to talk a little bit about what does that mean and what is different here, because there are some differences here that may seem new to you in some ways. So the personal outcomes are very similar in some ways to what you think of today as the valued outcomes. And the goal is to really use that person-centered planning process, use the information that the person is telling you about what they want from the service system to define those areas that are most important to the person receiving services. So, and then that would inform how you develop the goal or the valued outcome for the person. So you see in this chart that there's the CCO goal valued outcome. That's really based on all of those person-centered practices that we've used in the past and we continue to use and even enhance as we move into the future in the development of the life plan, but it's identifying what is most important to the person. And then from that process comes the ability to identify who will be supporting the person, which provider will then take that goal or valued outcome asked for by the person so that they can deliver supports and services in a way that will help the person achieve that outcome. And that gets defined within the provider assigned goal section. Then you'll see things that you're familiar with. What is the service type, frequency, quantity, time frame? Those are things that are part of today's world generally. And the idea is that you're saying, so for example, you might have the service type be community rehabilitation to support a person who's desiring more time in the community, engaged in a club of interest to them, and that's their goal or valued outcome. And so you'll see that in the service plan. What's different here is the tying back of those outcome areas that are of interest to the person to the CQL POMs, and I just want to spend a second kind of giving you a little bit of background on that. So OPWDD over the last several years has embraced the Council on Quality and Leadership POMs as a measure of quality through the person-centered lens. So it's the ability to do person-centered measurement around the achievement of outcomes most important to the person. So we've embraced that as one of the areas that's important. We've also embraced the overarching domain areas of the POMs as the areas that should be focused on as part of the person-centered planning process to determine what's of interest to that particular person. So at the end of the planning process, you would tie the goals that are identified for the person back to one of those CQL POM goal areas, and that's the first box in this chart. You may choose to use the POMS tool and the interview process that's very specifically defined through the POMS tool to help achieve that, but that's not a requirement of OPWDD. That's one of the tools that can be used to help in a person-centered planning process. But what is required is that at the end of the day, you need to move, you need to define or tie the goal or the valued outcome that is determined by the person back to one of those POM domain areas. The other thing that you'll see on this slide that's a little bit different than what you're used to is special considerations. And I'm going to hold off a discussion on that until we get through this next slide, which is Section 3, Health and Safety Support. And it also serves as the IPOP, Individual Protective Oversight Plan, where that is a required document in the service model, which is the RESHAB service. So we'll talk a little bit more about special considerations as we move into this section. So the purpose of the development of a safeguard plan for people who are receiving supports and services is really to look at the different areas in a person's life and determine if the person needs support around those areas to ensure or help them maximize their level of safety and personal security as it relates to the delivery of their supports and services. So what we do differently in the life plan than what you may be used to in some of the other historical ISP and related safeguards or IPOPs is the shift is to develop those safeguards specific to the person, and then to tie where there's a need for special activities associated with a particular setting or site or activity in the person's life. You could define that within the safeguard plan. But what we're moving away from is this idea that if you live in one setting, you know, you have some rules about how safety and supports are developed, but if you live in a different setting, you have different rules about how safety and supports are developed, because the idea is if we're going to expand the ability for people to be supported in a variety of living options, the level of building supports needs to tie back to the person, not the program model. So the development of safeguards become much more person-centered. And just to remind some people who you may or may not be familiar, but a lot of work groups over time, over the years, have said to us, you know, why do we have all these separate rules for different programs? So one of the benefits of building this integrated into the life plan is that it reduces inconsistencies across different sites, and it creates safeguards and supports that really relate back to the particular person and their particular needs. So that is one thing that's different. And I just want to take a minute in this slide to touch on what we mean by special considerations. And special considerations, I'm sure you all in your planning processes have encountered situations where there could be disagreements about what the support level for a person might be. So, for example, you could have a clinical team who, in the course of the planning and discussion with the individual and their circle of support and their providers, feel that the person needs more protection than the person may ultimately want for themselves. The special consideration section is an area where you can document that there was some disagreement, and you can document that there was an outcome associated with what the person wanted and a description of what might be different. And I'm just going to use a specific example to help make the point. So, for example, if a person goes to a job and they want to take the local bus to their job, and the team is working with that individual and their family, and they feel that, boy, you know, you really have some struggles sometimes getting on and off the bus, traveling independently could create a potential risk. We really think that you might be better off on an access van ride to your place of employment. And the person says, you know, I hear you, but I really want to travel independently. I want to be with other people in my neighborhood. I want to, you know, go to the bus stop and take the bus to my job the way other people do, and that's really what I want. So this is a place to say, you know, the team and the planning process suggested that perhaps additional safeguards were needed. However, the person made an informed choice to undertake an activity that was of interest to them, and they were able to make that choice, and they were able to make the decision to travel independently. And so in the planning process, that was supported at the request of the person. So that's just one example of what a special consideration may be. We know that there's oftentimes situation where there's disagreements, and this is a way to build where those disagreements or different considerations may come into discussion, and it can be highlighted as part of the planning process, and ultimately determinations reached about what is most appropriate in that particular situation. Okay, so section 4 is where you would document the delivery of approved waiver and Medicaid state plan services. So these are services that have been authorized. Most typically, these services are authorized through the regional office, who's authorizing waiver services. We also have many services that are authorized through localities and counties. Typically, that's personal care services, and those would be listed here as the authorized Medicaid services. The provider, effective dates, the units, and any comments relative to those particular services would be included there. And again, this is an area where the prior listing of services related more to just the HCBS services, and now we're looking to integrate all of the supports and services into the life plan for the individual within this section. Section 5 focuses on supports. And supports are a way to define all of the different supports within a person's life and the contact information and the role of those individuals. And again, remember, with this being in an IT system, this gives the team, the CCO, the people who are engaged through the portal, information about who's in a person's life and who's providing what type of support to that particular person in a way that we don't really have today. We don't have access to it in a prompt way, and this will help to ensure that those people and providers of service that are most integral in a person's life are clearly defined with good, updated, constantly timely information about each of those different support givers. So that is what is included in this support section. So let's just review some of the critical change areas that I've gone through. I think I highlighted them during the course of the presentation, but we'll just kind of highlight them again as things to pay attention to as you learn more about the life plan over time. So first, you'll see this term integrated throughout. Requirements that the life plan be integrated into an IT system. And that means you can access it, you can see it, it's available, it's timely, it's always available within a system so that it can be integrated with other elements of the service system in a way that today's ISPs are not. There's also integrated documentation that identifies the habilitative goals for the person and ties it back to the person-centered planning process. So the habilitative goals are very clearly defined within the life plan, and those goals established through the person and their support givers and their service providers should then drive the development of more specific habilitative supports for that individual that are truly person-centered and relate back to those very important domain areas in the person's life. Things like building relationships, having connections in your community, encouraging and maximizing your support with your family and your relationship with your family. Those are the areas of focus that those habilitative goals relate back to. It's also an integrated document where the safeguards are about the person and not about the program, and it incorporates the IPOP requirements into one critical life plan as opposed to having it as a separate document that only relates to a particular service model. So that integrated concept is really important to think about as you think about the new life plan and how it will work for the person. And then lastly is the expectation that those special considerations that someone might encounter in the course of their planning process are able to be described and documented. So useful documents to learn more about the life plan and to see some additional information relative to the life plan are the application for the development of the CCO health homes, and you'll be able to see some specific language in there. We also have posted, and you'll see the link here, but frequently asked questions related to the CCO health home, and you'll see information within that FAQ document about the life plan. And then lastly is the transition plan that is currently under, it was released as a draft, and we're working on compiling answers to some of the comments that came in through that draft transition plan. And for now, looking at the plan itself is really a helpful document to better identify some of the specific elements and requirements of the life plan. And there's an example in there. And certainly this PowerPoint also will provide you with some additional detail about the different elements that are included in the life plan. So with that, I will close and see if we have any questions.
We do, and I did actually try to answer a lot of questions as we went along, but there was a specific question about, with the changes taking place in July 2018, how should MSCs continue with scheduled or requested ISP meetings and updates? And I did answer this in the WebEx, so I just wanted to verbalize it in case people didn't read the WebEx. All currently scheduled ISP meetings or requested ISP meetings should be continued to be held until OBWDD issues specific guidance on the exact date that the life plan will be replacing the ISP. So service coordinators should not be canceling ISP meetings or not scheduling them. You should continue to do this work until the date that it is stated, and we will issue guidance on the exact date that the life plan must be in place.
Right. And just to expand just a tad on what Angie said, you know, we aren't expecting that the life plan transition occur prior to the start date of the CCO health home. So don't think that you have to have all the plans transitioned from an ISP to a life plan for the 7/1 start date. There will be a period of time, and it will likely connect to the ongoing schedule of ISPs, as Angie just said, that will be when the transition to the life plan will take place. So, you know, our goal is to work with you all and to work with the emerging CCO health homes to be able to come up with a specific defined plan for that transition that doesn't create tremendous burden and that allows for kind of a smooth transition process consistent with some of the ongoing work that you're already doing with people who are being supported in the current MSC service.
Another question that we had was, will there be separate habilitation plans? And I know that this is a little bit different as we incorporate them. So.
Right, so that's a great question. So some of the primary components of what is required in the HAB plan are defined in the life plan. Some of the specific activities associated with how the service will achieve those goals and the specific activities taken by staff to help the person meet those outcomes that have been defined will still be part of the service-related plan. They need to connect. They need to interrelate. So we expect that the HAB plans will be adjusted, you know, again, over time as those new outcome areas are identified by the person and established as part of the person-centered planning process. We'll likely have some more information about that exactly over time, but the critical elements of what needs to be included in the HAB plan are in the life plan, but some of the activity steps associated with delivering that remain with the provider, and how much information needs to come immediately back to the CCO on that, we're still working on defining.
One of the other questions was, how will all of this work with choices? If you want me to answer that. Some agencies use choices now or other IT systems for their ISPs. As we move into the CCO health homes, the CCO health home will identify an IT system outside of choices or the current their app or other system that they might be using that is comprehensive and includes all of this. So choices will no longer be used for ISPs, but we will be using it for required forms and documents as we do now.
If I could just add on that regard, there is work underway and there will be clarification. There is likely to be lots of opportunity for integrating various systems with the systems that will be used by our CCOs. But more information will be forthcoming on that.
Thank you. And I guess I would just end with there's been many questions both through email and through these WebExes about certificates for these trainings. No certificates will be issued for these web sessions. MSC should simply document them on the MSC training record, and your supervisor will sign off attesting to your attendance. But again, no certificates will be issued for any of these sessions.
Okay.
But it counts.
But it counts.
But it counts, yes. And we're very, very pleased with having the attendance and the participation and the questions, because it definitely helps us understand what you're struggling with and what you need to hear from us, and we hope that we're able to provide you with information that will help you feel less concerned and more confident in the move into the new CCO health home model. So thank you very much for your participation today, and we'll look forward to talking with you again in a couple weeks. So thanks a lot. Take care, everybody.